Okay, so I'm making this video in order to kind of point out some things that I found out here recently when I'm working with RenderMan and Blender. You'll come into problems where um, RenderMan is really particular about the geometry that you feed it, so that if you have a lot of n-gons in there, it doesn't really like it. It doesn't really like holes in geometry, and um, basically sometimes it screws up the normals of certain things. Sometimes it bridges over the top of holes through geometry, so on and so forth. So what I wanted to show you is just an example here really quick. I've been kind of doing these a little bit, and we're going to show you that it really doesn't like some of this geometry. Now, when you're exporting OBJ from somewhere or you're importing an OBJ, sometimes what happens is that OBJs are they have custom normal data within it. Uh, so what tends to happen is that that'll screw up the display within Blender when it starts doing custom normals. So the thing around that is if whatever package, if you're getting it as an exported package from somewhere, um, make sure that you tick off whatever option it has to export custom normal data, so then you don't have to turn it off. If you do have custom normal data, basically what you have is under your geometry tab, your geometry data. This will have an X under it. Right now it says add custom split normals data. You'll just hit the X, it'll clear it. So that it'll look a little bit better here. Blender will deal with it better, Cycles will deal with it better, and RenderMan doesn't really deal with it better by taking out those custom normals. Sometimes it kind of helps out a little bit, but as we take a look over here, um, this doesn't really look too bad of geometry right now, but over here there shouldn't be a shadow at all, and there is a little bit of a geometry problem here. There's a little bit of extra smoothing around here. Some stuff that is kind of smooth or rough around here. There's incomplete geometry here because I think it was supposed to be seen from a distance. This is one of the modules from the International Space Station. So these parts were supposed to be animated at some point in time, I think, and I don't think they put all the joints and stuff within here, but they did pretty good around here. Model was downloaded from NASA. So you can have this model. It's in a Lightwave format, so I had to export from Lightwave. But beyond that, what we're seeing here is a bunch of different errors that we kind of need to get rid of if we want it to look a little bit better. And I know this is just the regular default material that RenderMan applies, but I like it because it shows us the shading errors um, a little bit better this way. So how do we fix this? Well, what I used to do is go back in and I'd use an edge split modifier. So let's go ahead and use one of those really quick. And I think what I'm going to do is select these elements here and see if this does anything really quick. And anybody who's familiar with Blender knows what this edge split modifier does, and you can see that it does help us out right here inside the Blender viewport. Sometimes what you'll want to do is just leave it in the viewport so that you get a little extra peace of mind. And that popped everything up there. Usually the default of 30 degrees is pretty good. If you find that it's splitting things a little bit too much, you can play with the angle a little bit. Anything that is slightly under that is um, well, here, let me just turn this up a little bit and see if we can see it pop over there. See how we get the split angle just a little bit too high. As we bring it down, it splits it at a little lower tolerance here. Um, so it'll smooth out certain things and it'll split the geometry underneath that tolerance. What am I saying there? As long as it's 30 degrees and lower, it's safe, but anything higher than 30 degrees kind of gets split. So there's not a 30-degree deflection between any of these pieces right here. So they're going to be all smoothed out, and then it's going to split these edges around here. Anyway, when we start RenderMan again, what we see is that this is now starting to behave. and there was a shading error here before. See how there's shading errors there before, and then we had the shadow where it wasn't supposed to be, and there's some sort of shadow down there that's not supposed to be. We can get rid of that by doing the same thing there. But as you can see, we have a little bit better representation of what the geometry actually is right here in the new render. So the other thing that we have to take a look at is holes. And so right here, here's a perfect example. It looks great in Blender. Blender can handle the n-gons. It can handle you know, odd geometry. This is going to be, I believe, an odd piece of geometry. As you can see, it's already triangulated there, so I probably don't have to triangulate anything here. But what I would suggest to do, and I can't find any other holes in the geometry other than the thrusters right now. But what happens is that you'll start getting overlapping of stuff here. And let's see if this is going to have some overlapping in it a little bit. You see what's going on here is that the normal data, even though these are triangulated and put in here with triangles, we have this crossing over of geometry, and that's all due to this hole here. There might not be enough triangulation going on around here. So again, what we can do, what I have been doing, instead of going in here and trying to manually triangulate this stuff, which you can. I mean, there's still some triangulation that's missing around here. There's a really shoddy triangulation around it, so you can see that this is an n-gon, this is an n-gon, and that's where we get that overlap during the render. RenderMan doesn't like doing that, but I don't like adding geometry count too much. So the first thing that I'm going to do, because there seems to be some need for edge split around this area too, is we're going to go ahead and add the edge split, but instead of displaying it in the viewport, that's not exactly important to me because it is doing this. You can turn these off and save yourself some viewport performance, or you can keep them. It doesn't matter. The other thing that I would use is triangulate. And definitely when I use triangulate, I do it only render only. So this allows you to view it in the viewport of what it's doing, but it's not going to change much. This will do it in the edit mode area, and it kind of shows you the added faces that are in there, but it doesn't draw out all that stuff. So you can turn it off. It doesn't really matter. Blender is actually displaying this rather well. But if we start the render now in RenderMan, you can see that it's dealing with this stuff a lot better than it was before. Here's what we had before with that overlapping geometry, and here is what we have now. And so that's just really quick tips on how you would deal with stuff like this. The other thing is that around these rails that actually have some sort of smoothing applied to it, again, you would want to use the edge split that kind of corrects all that stuff there. And some of these handrails that are put on here have extra geometry that sticks out from them, and if it does, and it's like modeled as an n-gon, or even if it's modeled in a certain way that allows certain overlap of areas, RenderMan won't deal with it well, and it'll do an overlapping area. So let's see what we have with this one, and that seems to correct it pretty well. Again, these things are supposed to be seen from a distance. And sometimes when you zoom out, it doesn't like to update very well. Yeah, let's just shine a little light on this a little bit from the other side. That's an odd place to be doing that. Anyway, So you can see that RenderMan doesn't like any of this geometry back here. The same shading artifacts are going on, so on and so forth. So we're going to have to fix those with the edge split and modifier. And like I said, it's all up to you whether or not you want to keep that geometry within Blender, because it does add up some of the edge counts, but it does correct this. Right? We have some other stuff here. I don't even think I have the right thing selected, but we might. Select that. And then we can see that RenderMan starts to like it. Here we go again with one of these things where this is a shading error, because of how it's built in here. So this is where I start going, okay, I'm going to start thinking about adding in the triangulate. Whoops, not on that one. Go here, and we're going to add the triangulate modifier, but I'm not going to, I don't want to see it, and I don't want to have the count up here. All I want to do is send it to the renderer, and that's it. And let's see if that'll fix that, and it sure does. So keep in mind, if you have some tricky geometry and you don't know what's going on with it, and you're using RenderMan and you're trying to, just kick out some work, and you're like, oh god, I keep on having shading errors and stuff like that, it's usually because of the normals. It likes the edge split a little bit better. It doesn't look at smoothing as much. Like, you can turn on smoothing and you can use auto smooth all you want, and RenderMan won't see it. Cycles is the only thing that sees it, and when you start getting into trouble where there may be a hole under here or something like that, holes in geometry, so on and so on, or like overlapping types of geometry that are built out of n-gons, then you'll want to go ahead and use the triangulate option here, and I would only activate it so that it's using it only during the render and not during anything else. Edge split, like I said, on some of the models I've been using it just during the render and not in the viewport or in edit mode. It's just your preference, however you want to take a look at it. So that's my tip for today. I hope you got something from it, and have a good one.